There's a lot of debate about what it takes to foster creativity, especially within education. One view held by some creative reformers is that structure inhibits creativity. Creativity is synonymous with free thinking, and structure is like shackles of the mind. It puts you in a box. Basically, here's a vague idea of what you need to do. Here's your brain. Now, go be a genius. But the reality is your brain needs structure. Even your neural networks are structured. This anti-structure mantra is so pervasive that it's found in nearly every discipline. Let's take a look at just a few. First, music. How many times have you heard that it's more important to have an ear for music than it is to be able to read it? That you can get along just fine without ever learning how to read notes. Now, I'm not in a position to say which is more important, reading or hearing, but my point is this. Imagine what the world would be like if there was no method for writing music down. That the only way for musicians to share their composition was to play their songs over and over and over until it got stuck in people's heads. Think about how difficult it would be to even compose a song. You would have to mentally keep track of every sound you played and remember the exact movements to reproduce that sound. Various forms of music notation have been around for thousands of years, but it's interesting that as the current staff notation was being developed and adopted, music exploded. Composers from all over the world were able to share their creations. Students were able to mimic the great masterpieces and be exposed to rhythms they never would have thought of themselves. Music flourished when it became structured. Another example is dancing. For as fluid and natural as professional dancers can look, they are actually following a very precise structure. At the core of every defined dance is a series of figures that the dancers practice, such as basic steps or underarm turns, and so on. They then weave those figures together into a beautiful and elegant performance. Without the structure of those clearly defined figures, students wouldn't know what to practice, and their partners wouldn't be able to synchronize their movements. Let's look at something other than the arts. How about strategy? We sometimes look at the great military generals or even the grandmaster chess players and think, wow, those guys are geniuses. But even these great men didn't conjure up their strategies out of thin air. They had years of learning patterns of war, such as when you need reinforcements, when to use artillery, flanking the enemy, and so on. When a general comes up with his brilliant strategy, he's really just piecing together different combinations and variations of structures he already knows. So what's the takeaway from all this? Here's the principle. Learning must be codified. Every discipline has a language and patterns. Your creativity is limited to the extent that you have mastered those languages and patterns. If you are a teacher, your focus should be three things. First, make sure your students can speak the language, whether it's music, science, history, programming, you name it. Second, make sure your students master individual patterns. Now that's going to look different depending upon the field. For music, it could be identifying and playing scales or how to hold an instrument. For science, you could teach your students how to make accurate observations or hypotheses. Third, immerse your students into situations that force them to weave those patterns together or to speak the language. Have them play a wide variety of music or use the scientific method to infer a truth about the world. If you are a self-directed learner, then as you are learning, search diligently for those patterns and study the language. It is then your responsibility to figure out how to practice those patterns and language.